Hey guys, what's happening? It's Professor Headwreck back with you again. Been wanting to actually do this video for quite a while now. It was originally going to be my top 10 favorite metal albums, but unfortunately I couldn't really narrow it down to just 10, so I think it's a total of 16 is what I came up with the count as. So I kind of made the rules for myself a little bit simple on this one, though. It's only albums that I actually have the physical copy of, as in like actually owning the CD. Digital downloads don't count. I'm probably going to do an honorable mention for stuff that I've got on my iPod that I have downloaded on there, but I don't have the actual physical copy. If that were the case, the list would probably be vastly different than what it's going to be today. I mean, there's still a lot of great stuff on here, but there's stuff that I have in my iPod that I probably rank maybe a little bit higher than some of the stuff that's on my list. But I mean, like I said, this is just a list of the stuff that I actually physically own copies of. If you hear the slurping in the background, that's the dog drinking. So the other thing is too, and I want to put a full-on disclaimer on this. This isn't a quote-unquote best album. This is simply a favorite album. I mean, just because I have a favorite doesn't necessarily mean that I think that it's the best one. It just happens to be a personal favorite of mine. I'll kind of give some examples, as the video progresses, as to kind of what I think would maybe be the best album from that band. And obviously, too, this is just an opinion. I don't want to see people kind of getting all bent out of shape because there's something on here that you're like, oh, why isn't this on here? I mean, obviously, after the video's over with and whatnot, I invite you to leave comments and tell me what you'd love to have seen on this video, or, what some of your favorite bands and albums are. But as of right now, I mean, to kind of paraphrase Ripley 4077, or actually, as he's calling himself now, Retro Death. If you haven't checked his channel out, check it out. It's absolutely awesome. Seems like a really cool dude. He's in France. Just giving him a shout out. But to paraphrase him, this is my list. It's not your list. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and start the countdown. I believe, like I said, 16. I'll just do a quick count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 16. So number 16 is a band by the name of Vengeance Rising, and this is an album called Human Sacrifice. I had gotten this album back when I was 14 years old. I had first given my life to Christ, and I was really, really into metal. Still am, obviously. But there was something I wanted to listen to, and obviously my parents were trying to, kind of lead me away from more secular music. So a guy in our church had made me a tape of this, and Vengeance Rising, but what an awesome band this was. They disbanded, I think, some time ago, as far as memory serves me correctly. But wow, this was, I believe, their very first album. It was really odd, like very thrashy, but with like kind of death metal vocals, real growly. Roger Martinez was an absolutely phenomenal frontman. So yeah, if you haven't checked this one out, definitely. All right, number 15, Opeth, Blackwater Park. I hate to admit it, this is the only Opeth album I own. I'm not the biggest black metal, death metal fan, but Opeth I would probably put more in as obviously like progressive. Wow, though, just absolutely awesome songwriting. I love the transition, how it will go from like speed metal into black metal into folk to jazz. I mean, a real wide array. I mean, this is an absolutely awesome album. Everything else that I've heard from them, I really, really like, but unfortunately, this is the only album I own. I definitely need to pick more of them up. But yeah, number 15, Opeth, Blackwater Park. All right, number 14, Death Angel, Act 3. I know a lot of people probably would pick Frolic Through the Park or even the Ultraviolence. I think that the reason why this one is my favorite is the songwriting on it is really, really good. It was when they started to kind of going a little more into that funk and playing a lot. Dennis Peppa playing a little more of the slap bass, and you could tell that they had really matured as songwriters. Frolic Through the Park, I actually have that on my iPod. I haven't listened to it enough though. I've listened to it, like a handful of times. I think the songwriting on that is really, really good. You could tell the maturity level, but I think this is really where they hit the pinnacle of maturity before they had split. Ultraviolence, I thought, was really, really good, but you could tell that they were kids. You know, you had a lot of the same riffs that repeated, and you know, all the songs were, you know, I mean, there wasn't a song that was under 6 minutes long. So, but Act 3 is definitely one of my favorites. All right, let's see, 16. Number 13, Anthrax, Among the Living. I know that there's a lot of debate as to, you know, which one the better album was between Among the Living or Spreading the Disease. Among the Living is just really the album that solidified me more as an Anthrax fan. Spreading the Disease, I think, is still really awesome. Just a really, really great speed power metal album. But I think Among the Living, they just kind of raised the bar. And, I mean, from Evil Necrophulsion to, you know, Indians, there's just a I don't think there's a bad song on this album. It's just one of the, I think, a perfect album as far as Anthrax goes. So yeah. Alright, number 12, another Christian metal band by the name of Tourniquet. This is the album Stop the Bleeding. I believe this was their first release. What an amazing band this was. It still is, actually. The founding member, Ted Kirkpatrick, drummer, also wrote all of the guitar parts. I want to say, too, that I read on Blabbermouth within the last week, he's actually putting out a compilation album with people like Marty Friedman, who's supposed to be on it, Chris Poland, I think Doug Pinnick from King's X. It's supposed to have a spoken word by Ed Asner, which, as far as I know that these guys are real animal rights activists. I don't know how extreme they go with it. I mean, if you have somebody with the likes of Ed Asner doing a spoken word, it worries me that they are a bit on the extreme side, considering Ed Asner's a dyed-in-the-womb Marxist. But they actually have a song on here called "Art of Suffering," which is against animal abuse. But I mean, other really, really good songs on here. "You Get What You Pray For," "The Threshing Floor," "Tears of Korah." Just really, really good and just awesome speed metal. And it's hard to believe Ted Kirkpatrick, I mean, he's the guy that writes all this stuff too. So not only an awesome drummer, but a really killer guitar player as well. He had other musicians, though, doing the guitar parts, but I mean, he wrote a majority of them. So yeah, check them out if you get a chance. All right, next up, Iced Earth, Night of the Storm Rider. Now, this is a band who, there's a lot of other stuff I could have really picked. I was torn between this one and Days of Purgatory. The reason I didn't go with Days of Purgatory is because it is more of, it's not a best of, but obviously it's stuff off of Iced Earth, Night of the Storm Rider, and Burnt Offerings that's just been re-recorded and remastered, obviously updated with Matt Barlow's vocals. But the rawness of Night of the Storm Rider, I think, is what kind of did it for me. The first Iced Earth album had some really good stuff on there, but this one, I just think, I love the storyline, I love the, just the songs in general. I mean, Storm Rider is probably my absolute favorite Iced Earth song. But, I mean, just some of the other great ones on here, you know, Traveling Stygian, Angel's Holocaust, The Path That I Choose. I think Pure Evil's on this one. Yeah, Pure Evil. Just absolutely great album. I had a chance to actually see these guys open for Megadeth back in 2001. It was really cool because Richard Christie was drumming for them. This was when they were on tour for the Horror Show album. Saw them at the Metropole in Pittsburgh, which I believe is now closed down. But yeah, it was awesome. Caught Richard Christie's drumstick, and then after the show, my buddy Jason and I managed to meet Dave Mustaine. So that was a really good night. But yeah, Iced Earth, Night of the Storm Rider, definitely a good pickup. All right, next on the list, Death, The Sound of Perseverance. Another album that I hate to say this is the only Death album I own. I do have in my iPod, though, Human, Individual Thought Patterns, and there's one more on there that I have, and I, for the life of me, cannot. Symbolic. I have those other three albums on my iPod. This, though, my wife had actually got me this for my birthday when I turned 25, I think. I'd heard it before, but Chuck Schuldiner was an absolute genius. I mean, the riffs that the guy came up with, the guitar solos, somebody who also, in my opinion, as far as musicians, really thought outside of the box. And I think unfortunately, one of the most underrated musicians in somewhat of the mainstream, not so mainstream press. I mean, in the underground metal world, this guy is just lauded as being a genius. But unfortunately, in the pages of Guitar World, he was never prominent, which I think is an absolute shame because the guy was just an absolute genius. So the only reason that I picked this is because it is the one that I own. But the stuff I've listened to Symbolic several times. Really, really great album. I haven't heard too much from them that I can't say that I like. I haven't listened to Human yet, and I've only listened to very little of individual Thought Patterns. So definitely look forward to actually getting into those. I have a ton of other stuff on my iPod right now that I got to get to, and it's just one of the those two are just two of the many on the list that I need to listen to. So all right, now we are down to I think number 8. I think we're at 8. And it would be Metallica, Master of Puppets. Here's a really good situation where people, would kind of get into, oh, well, that's not their best album. I'm not saying it's their best album. I'm saying this is my favorite album. Rock radio has unfortunately killed quite a few of the songs on this album. One of the main reasons that I like this album so much, it's not because of Master of Puppets, it's not because of Sanitarium, and it's not because of Battery or Damage Inc. Those are all really great songs. The two that I love the most off of this are Leper Messiah and Orion. And really, that's kind of why this is my favorite album. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Ride the Lightning is absolutely incredible, and Kill 'Em All is just hands down one of the best, like, just debut thrash metal albums. But I think for me it was the production on this. I think the songwriting is absolutely incredible. The guitar playing, Lars wasn't quite as lazy on his drumming on this one. I guess the same could really be said about Injustice for All. Injustice was actually kind of borderline progressive metal as well. A lot of chord and tempo changes and stuff that went into that. But yeah, Master of Puppets though is it's my favorite Metallica album. It's kind of funny though, real quick story. I jammed with a kid years ago who, I kid you not, tried arguing with me and telling me that the Black Album was Metallica's best album. And I shit you not, the reason he said this was because it had, and I quote, all their hits on it. Now to me, that is the true sign of a poser. If you're willing to say that the Black Album is the best because of the hits. So yeah, F people like that. Alright, next up, another Christian metal band, Deliverance, Weapons of Our Warfare. If you are not into Christian metal, you will be after listening to these guys. These guys are phenomenal. They have sounds that go from Metallica into Overkill, into Anthrax, and even so much as certain elements of the singing sometimes even kind of remind me of Bruce Dickinson, but wow, from just the song Weapons of Our Warfare, Supplication, If We Faint Not, what was the other one on here? Flesh and Blood, Solitude, Slay the Wicked is awesome. But just hands down, and this was another one of those bands in '92 that I got into. And recently, actually, this one, The Vengeance Rising, and the Tourniquet, I just all acquired within this year, and I was really glad to, because it really took me down memory lane. I forgot how good the stuff was, because I had this all on tape, back in the day. And as time goes on, obviously, tapes wear out, and they get eaten, and in today's technology, in the technological world, you don't see too many tape decks anymore. So, yeah, definitely a good one worth checking out. All right. The next one here, I don't know if you can necessarily call this metal. I know it would be kind of in the realms of grunge or alternative, but when the big four of the early 90s, which would be Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains came out, Alice in Chains was really the heaviest. And I mean, it was really borderline metal, and it was kind of during that early time period where you were seeing that real heaviness and not a lot of technicality within the playing, but there was still heavy riffs. it still sounded really good. You had that from bands like Clutch and Prong. Even some of the earlier Pantera was kind of borderline that, like, but not a whole lot. You know, I mean, Pantera definitely had that groove style to them, but a lot more fast right hand, and Vinnie Paul's, you know, double kick really added more to the thrash element of it. But wow, this is an awesome album. And unfortunately, the one song I have on this album that I hate is Man in the Box, because, of course, rock radio has killed it. They won't play any of the other songs off of this, which is a shame, because every other song on this album is so good. You know, Put You Down is awesome. I Know Something About You, Real Thing. You know, Love, Hate, Love, Bleed the Freak. All awesome. I haven't listened to this album in a while, so I have to try to, like, remember the stuff off the top of my head, and I can't, so I'm reading them off the back, so I kind of cheat a little bit. But yeah, if you haven't checked out Facelift, and and Alice in Chains' other stuff was really good. They started going a lot more melodic and acoustic as the years have gone by, and but they still, out of the four, remain my favorite. Pearl Jam was more of a blues rock, a good blues rock band, I guess, but Soundgarden just never really did it for me, and Nirvana flat out sucked. If you're a Nirvana fan and that offends you, too bad. Nirvana sucked. Alright, next up, Judas Priest, Hellbent for Leather. There are a lot of other selections that probably could have been picked. I know a lot of people's go-to albums are usually Screaming for Vengeance or Painkiller. Sometimes Ram It Down, I think, because it had a little more thrash element to it, but this, to me, has such a great element of both heavy metal, classic heavy metal, but also just really good bluesy, hard rock. I mean, Delivering the Goods is one of my favorite albums or songs off of here. Burnin' Up, I love Burnin' Up, and I was in a band not all that long ago, and I mean, we covered Green Manalishi, Running Wild, really, really great. Rock Forever, another great song. I mean, this is one of those albums I can listen to straight through and be like, wow, this is really, really good. And ironically, just a few days ago, I saw Judas Priest in Pittsburgh, and unfortunately, the only song that they played off of this was Hellbent for Leather, which, I mean, a great song to play, but wish I'd heard a little bit more. They played a little bit more off of Defenders of the Faith, considering it's they said the 30th anniversary of Defenders of the Faith. So, but yeah, if you haven't listened to Hellbent for Leather, this is definitely a must-have for anybody who's a metalhead. Alright, now to number 5. No metal collection would be complete, or no metal top 10, without at least one selection from King Diamond. And I'm ashamed to say it, this is the only King Diamond album I have a physical copy of. Now, in my iPod, I have Fatal Portrait, Voodoo, and Abigail, which I've listened to. Them, however, is my absolute... This was the album that got me into King Diamond. My buddy Jason had made me a mix CD of a bunch of different stuff. It had some Sepultura, had some Death Angel, had some Slayer. But the last song on there that he had put on the album was The Accusation Chair. And I remember listening to it over and over again, and I asked him, I was like, dude, who is that? And he's like, dude, that's King Diamond. You've got to listen to them. And I went out and I bought the album, and I was absolutely intrigued by it. The playing aspect, Andy LaRocque and Pete Black, I think, are just two of the most phenomenal guitar players. Mickey D's drummings were just insane. The whole concept of the album, and I mean, obviously, the whole story of, King's grandmother getting out of the insane asylum and, making bloody tea, and just the whole thing, but just the riffs and the songwriting was absolutely great. And I listened to it over and over again. I mean, it's still one of my favorite albums. It's definitely, my wife hates it, by the way, which is okay. So she doesn't have to listen to it when I'm in the car. So, all right. Number 4, Skid Row, Slave to the Grind. Skid Row is one of those bands that, for some odd reason, got lumped in with that hair metal category, and they couldn't be anything farther from hair metal. I know there were a lot of bands in the late 80s, early 90s, because they had kind of puffier hair or whatnot. They were lumped in with that, but Skid Row was not a hair metal band by any stretch of the imagination. And I mean, just one listen to Slaves of the Grind will totally put that debate to rest. Wow. Just an absolutely killer album. I do have I have the first one, and I have Subhuman Race on my iPod. So it is the actual 3 that Sebastian Bach did with Skid Row before he left the band. But this one is not only my favorite, but this one's by far got to be their best one. This one arguably is their best album. So many just really, really great songs on here. I mean, Monkey Business, Slave to the Grind, In a Darkened Room, Riot Act, Quicksand Jesus. If you're lucky enough to have the copy that has Get the F Out on it, that's just an awesome song. Beggar's Day, that's another great one on here too. But yeah, if you've never listened to Skid Row, I definitely suggest giving this one a listen. You will be a fan. Subhuman Race is a lot different. It definitely has, some of the songs have more of that mid-90s alternative feel to it, and I think that's because, from what I had been told, I've never really done any research on my own, but I guess Sebastian wanted to go heavier, make things more metal, and the rest of the guys in the band were like, no, this is the trend we got to follow, we got to go more alternative, and that was kind of what eventually led to the split. But yeah, check this out if you have not listened to it yet. Alright, number 3, Testament, Souls of Black. Wow. I was blown away the first time I heard this album. What actually got me into Testament was the album The Ritual, and I had heard Return to Serenity. I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. My best friend Larry, who he bought me this CD for the Christmas of '99 because I wore his tape out of it so much playing it in my car. But The Ritual got me into Testament. He's like, dude, you've got to listen to Souls of Black. And through pretty much late '99 through almost the entire spring of the year 2000, this was all I listened to, was just Souls of Black nonstop over and over again. Now, one of my quick disclaimers, I'm not saying that this one is their best album. This one's just my personal favorite just because of kind of what I was going through at the time, and I had a lot of great memories listening to this. If I had to pick their best album, it would either have to be The Legacy or The New Order, just because the riffs on The New Order are absolutely incredible. That is still one that I can listen to over and over and over again. But for some reason, just this one's my favorite. 7 Days of May is one of my absolute favorite songs on this whole album. But yeah, just really freaking great album. Malpractice is One Man's Fate. My buddy Larry, though, actually screws up the lyrics to One Man's Fate. The line is lightning skies, prayers from an open grave. And he screws it up, and he always sings Like a Child Prays for an Open Grave. I always laugh at him about it, but yeah, man, love him to pieces. He's one of my best friend, but yeah, he got me into Testament, and I forever thank him for that. All right, getting on to the last 2 here. Number 2 is Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion 2. Now, before people start jumping all over me as to, all right, why is it not Appetite for Destruction? Well, first off, I'll tell you, I only have a digital copy of Appetite for Destruction. I have, physical copy-wise, I have this and Lies. It's not because I'm a poser, it's just because I've never bought Appetite for Destruction. I've never bought Use Your Illusion 1. This was the first Guns N' Roses album that I ever bought, and I bought it in the spring of 1992. I saved up all my money so that I could buy this, and wow, I must have gone through probably 4 different tapes. I played it so much, it was constantly getting eaten by my tape deck. What really solidified me for this album was because the summer of 1991, the video for You Could Be Mine was everywhere. It was all over MTV. It was back, of course, when MTV was good, or at least tolerable. You know, it's garbage now, of course. But, I mean, just that coupled with Terminator 2, and I remember getting this, and I remember at first I had the cassette single for You Could Be Mine, and on the B-side of it was Civil Wars. So I was like really stoked when I bought this. I was like, oh cool, Civil Wars is on there, and so I knew I had 2 songs on there that I knew. But wow, just from start to finish, I don't skip through any songs on this album because every one of them is so good, and it just brings me back. It brings me back to a simpler time, I guess. You know, being 14 years old, and you think back to the things you were doing as a kid and the time frame, and you know, there's times you think, you know, what I wouldn't give to be able to just go back and relive those days, but I'm able to do it through the music on this CD, and yeah, just it's one of my favorites. All right. Now we get to number one on the list, and this may piss some people off. It may cause you to say that I'm jumping on the bandwagon, but hear me out and I will give you a reason. My absolute favorite metal album of all time is Rust in Peace. Now, before people start jumping on the "you're a poser, you're only jumping on the Rust in Peace" bandwagon, hear me out. I had, when I was a senior in high school, I had an absolute hard-on for Metallica. Like, Metallica was it for me, you know, and one of my very close friends whom I graduated with, his name was Josh Breeze. If you get a chance, check out, I think it's 13th Paradox. It's a band that he has. He's a phenomenal, phenomenal guitar player. We used to talk music quite a bit back and forth, and he's like, dude, if you think that James and Kirk have a really good rhythm lead relationship, he's like, you've got to hear Marty and Dave. And I kind of blew it off. Well, one night, just for something to do, we were heading to Rochester to the Great House of Guitars. He put this in, and from the moment that Holy Wars hit, I was absolutely blown away. And I just listened over and over again to the album. And literally 2 days later, I found myself back up in Rochester buying this album on tape. And I listened to it over and over and over again. See, Metallica made me want to play metal. Megadeth, and this album in particular, really changed my perspective on the writing of it and how it was played. And I'm avoiding the whole Metallica versus Megadeth thing. I think that is so overdone. It is so overplayed. People have to get into that conversation. Dude, do you have something better to do? Who cares? You know, they both are amazing bands. I hate that conversation. But nobody can deny the amount of talent and the amount of just sheer talent that Dave Mustaine has, and this is a really, really good showcase of it. There's not a bad song on this album. I know a lot of people will go to Peace Sells, which Peace Sells is probably my favorite, or my second favorite Megadeth album. You know, where people will go to Countdown to Extinction, or Killing Is My Business, or So Far, So Good, So What. Very rarely do they go to anything past Countdown. But I'd have to say, for me anyways, it wasn't until United Abominations that he came out with anything that even closely recaptured what he had done on this. But there isn't a bad song on this album. There's other Megadeth albums that I can skip through songs because I just don't care for them. But this is one of the gems that, if I was told you're allowed to pick one album to listen to for the rest of your life, it would be this, because it was so influential in how I approach my guitar playing, and how I just how I viewed writing in general, and how music should be played, metal in particular. There isn't a musician out there that will not cite this as being one of their biggest influences, you know, and I include myself into that camp. So, yeah, just metal for that. Okay, now I'm going to do some honorable mentions, some stuff that I've got in my iPod that I had the actual physical copies. Now, some of them I actually had burned copies of, but to me that doesn't count. You got to have the jewel case, you got to have the art book. I love digital music, but at the same time, I love having the physical copy, because anything happens to this or happens to your hard drive, you're screwed. So, I'm going to go through here with some of the stuff that really was, I think, you gotta take it into consideration. I do a lot of this stuff from a guitar player standpoint, so a lot of it has to do with the riffs, the technicality of it, and that's what I look at. So,